Welcome to the Crime Bowl podcast, where it's true crime, no bull. A special thank you to all our listeners, new and old. We love you just the same. May you find peace in your hearts and peace in these streets. Stay safe out there. Let's get started. We're diving deep into a case that feels ripped from the pages of a mystery novel. The perplexing life and unsolved questions surrounding Robert Ivan Nichols, a man who lived for decades under the stolen identity of Joseph Newton Chandler III.
What's fascinating about this case is how it really makes you think about identity. Who are we really? What drives someone to completely reinvent themselves, leaving behind everything and everyone they know?
That's what we're here to unpack today. We've got a stack of articles, police reports, even some personal notes from the investigators. And let me tell you, this story takes some wild turns. It all starts in July 2002 with the apparent suicide of Joseph Newton Chandler III in his apartment in Eastlake, Ohio. Seems straightforward enough, right?
Not quite. During routine identification, investigators hit a snag. The Social Security number Chandler was using belonged to a young boy from Texas who died in a car crash decades earlier in 1945. Imagine their surprise.
Hold on. So right off the bat, we've got a dead man living under a stolen identity. Where do investigators even begin to unravel this? What did they find when they started digging into Chandler's life?
Well, Chandler was described as a recluse by his neighbors and coworkers. He lived a strikingly simple life in a small apartment kept to himself and seemed to have no real personal connections. What's even more curious is that even after winning a substantial sum in the lottery in 1997, he maintained this minimalist lifestyle, almost like he was intentionally trying to fly under the radar.
Okay, now that's intriguing. Winning the lottery usually brings about some lifestyle changes. What about his apartment? Any clues there as to who this man really was?
Investigators found a few curious items in his apartment. A receipt from a Nebraska hospital dating back to the late 1970s, and some survivalist gear. This was particularly puzzling because no one knew of any ties he had to Nebraska, nor why he would need survival supplies.
Survivalist gear? What kind of gear are we talking about here?
Unfortunately, the reports aren't very specific. They just mention basic camping equipment, some tools, water purification tablets, that sort of thing. Not necessarily out of the ordinary on its own, but definitely adds to the enigma considering his otherwise unremarkable lifestyle.
Right, like was he preparing for some kind of doomsday scenario? Or was he running from something? This just gets more and more curious. Did they ever figure out the Nebraska connection?
That was a tantalizing lead, but it ultimately led to more dead ends. No family or friends ever came forward, and investigators couldn't find any records on Chandler before 1978, the year he assumed the stolen identity. It was like he materialized out of thin air.
So for over a decade, investigators are chasing a ghost. I mean, there must have been something, some clue that pointed them in the right direction, right?
There were a few breadcrumbs, but nothing that provided a clear picture of who he was or why he chose this path. One particularly odd incident was his hospital visit in 1986 for an injury he claimed he sustained while fixing his vacuum cleaner.
A vacuum cleaner injury. That seems a bit unusual.
Exactly. He showed up at the hospital with an injury to his groin, claiming it happened while repairing his vacuum. It certainly raised eyebrows among the staff, and investigators were left wondering if this was a genuine accident, a bizarre cover story, or just another example of his eccentricity.
It makes you wonder what was going on in his mind. Did he just want to disappear, or was he living in constant fear of being discovered?
That's a question that has haunted this case for years.
Yeah.
And then there's the story of his LL Bean trip. In 1989, he drove all the way from Ohio to Maine, almost 700 miles, only to turn around in the LL Bean parking lot without ever going inside.
Hold on. A 1,400-mile round trip for nothing. You didn't think winning the lottery would mean a little more excitement in his life?
Yeah.
Not aimless road trips. Was he spooked? Did you think someone was onto him?
It's one of the many perplexing details in this case. Was it a change of heart, a sign of paranoia, or just another inexplicable action in a life full of them?
It's like trying to assemble a puzzle where half the pieces are missing. So we have this mysterious man living a double life, a web of unanswered questions, and investigators hitting dead end after dead end. What finally gave them the break they needed? How did they uncover his true identity?
The answer, thankfully, lies in the world of forensic science. You see, remember that Nebraska hospital receipt we talked about? Well, that, along with DNA taken from Chandler's remains, became the key to unlocking the mystery.
Okay, this work gets really interesting. We're talking about forensic genealogy, right?
Yeah.
For listeners who might not be familiar, can you break down how this technology works and how it helped crack this case wide open?
Absolutely. Forensic genealogy is like a digital detective sifting through millions of DNA profiles in public ancestry databases. By comparing DNA from a crime scene, or in this case unidentified remains, to these databases, investigators can search for distant relatives who might share genetic markers. It's essentially a massive family tree search.
So it's using DNA to connect the dots and trace lineages back through generations. That's incredible. Did it work in this case?
It did. In 2016, after years of hitting dead ends, this technology led investigators to a family in New Albany, Indiana. Finally, they had a name: Robert Ivan Nichols.
Robert Ivan Nichols. So who was this man hiding in plain sight? What do we know about his life before he became Joseph Newton Chandler III?
Robert Ivan Nichols was a World War II veteran who vanished from his family's life in 1965. He had a quiet life, worked as a draftsman, and then, poof, disappeared without a trace. He left a note saying he was leaving, but gave no indication of where he was going or why. His family never heard from him again until his death in 2002, living under that assumed name.
Wow, that's heartbreaking. Imagine the shock for his family learning after all these years that he'd been living this secret life. What was their reaction?
They were understandably stunned. They described him as a reserved man, someone who kept to himself. No history of trouble with the law, no known mental health issues. They simply couldn't fathom why he would choose to erase his past and create this entirely new persona.
And that's a drastic step to take, to just walk away from your life and assume a new identity. What could possibly drive someone to such extremes?
That's the million-dollar question. Some speculate that he might have witnessed something traumatic during the war, perhaps something that made him fear for his safety. Others believe he could have been struggling with undiagnosed PTSD, or maybe he just desperately craved a clean break from his old life, a fresh start. We can only speculate.
You know, living under a stolen identity for so long, always looking over your shoulder, it must take a psychological toll. It makes you wonder if he was constantly haunted by his past. But if he wasn't running from something specific like the law or a dangerous situation, what was he running from? Himself, his memories.
Those are questions we may never have definitive answers to. What we do know is that Robert Ivan Nichols, for whatever reason, went to extraordinary lengths to reinvent himself. He meticulously crafted a new life, a new identity, leaving behind a trail of bewildering clues and unanswered questions.
It's a stark reminder that everyone has a story, and sometimes those stories are stranger than fiction. But there's another layer to this mystery, isn't there? This is where we delve into the realm of speculation and explore the theory that has captivated true crime enthusiasts for years: the possible connection between Robert Ivan Nichols and the Zodiac Killer.
That's right. It's a theory that, while lacking concrete evidence, is nonetheless intriguing. It's important to approach it with a healthy dose of skepticism, but the potential links are certainly worth exploring.
I'm all ears. What are the key points that fuel this theory?
Well, it starts with the timeline. Nichols disappears in 1965, 3 years before the Zodiac Killers first confirm a murder in 1968. Then he resurfaces in 1978, around the time the Zodiac communications cease. Could it be possible that he assumed a new identity to evade capture?
That was a rather striking coincidence. But is there anything more substantial that links him to the Zodiac?
Some point to his military background. Nichols served in the Navy, and the Zodiac was known for using codes and ciphers in his letters. Could there be a connection there? Maybe his military experience gave him the skills to create those complex codes. Plus, there are those who claim that Nichols bears a resemblance to some of the composite sketches of the Zodiac.
Okay, I see where they're coming from, but those seem like rather circumstantial pieces of evidence. Has any direct evidence emerged linking him to the Zodiac's crimes?
Unfortunately, no. There's been no DNA match to any of the Zodiac crime scenes, and there's no confirmation that he was ever in California during the time of the murders.
So while the timing and a few superficial similarities might raise eyebrows, it seems like the theory rests largely on speculation.
Exactly. It's important to remember that we're dealing with a lot of unknowns. It's tempting to connect the dots and create a narrative, but we have to be careful not to jump to conclusions without solid evidence.
That's a good point. It's easy to get caught up in the intrigue, but we have to stick to the facts. So where does this leave us? We have a man who lived a double life, a mystery shrouded in enigma, and a possible, albeit unproven, connection to one of America's most infamous unsolved cases.
It's a case that, despite revealing his true identity, leaves us with more questions than answers. It underscores the power of DNA technology in solving cold cases, but it also reminds us that some secrets may remain buried forever.
This deep dive has been a whirlwind of twists and turns. What are the key takeaways you want our listeners to ponder as we move into the final part of our discussion?
Well, I think this case really highlights the complexities of human nature. It makes you think about identity, privacy, and the choices we make in life. It also raises questions about the burdens of the past and the lengths some will go to escape them.
We're back for the final chapter in our deep dive into the perplexing life of Robert Ivan Nichols, a.k.a. Joseph Newton Chandler III. It's a case that's taken us through stolen identities, baffling behaviors, and even a possible connection to the Zodiac killer.
While that connection remains purely speculative, it raises the fascinating question, what if he had been the Zodiac? What would that mean for our understanding of Nichols?
It's a chilling thought, this quiet, reclusive man living an ordinary life while potentially harboring such a dark secret. Do you think it's possible to reconcile those two sides?
It's certainly a challenge. The Zodiac was brazen, craving attention, reveling in the terror he inflicted. Nichols, on the other hand, seemed to disappear into the background, almost as if he was trying to erase himself completely.
It makes you wonder if the pressure of living a double life, the fear of exposure, might have contributed to his eventual suicide.
It's certainly a possibility. Imagine the weight of carrying such a secret for decades, the constant anxiety, the paranoia, the knowledge that your carefully constructed life could crumble at any moment.
And yet there's no denying that this case has significantly impacted the field of cold case investigations. Nichols' story is a testament to the power of DNA technology and forensic genealogy. It gives hope to so many families seeking answers to long unresolved mysteries.
Absolutely. This case cracked open a decades-old cold case and brought a sense of closure, however bittersweet, to Nicholas's family. It demonstrates that even the most deeply buried secrets can eventually be brought to light.
It's both fascinating and a bit unsettling, isn't it? The idea that even in death, our past can catch up to us.
It certainly challenges our notions of identity and privacy. What does it mean to truly disappear in a world where our genetic code can unravel our most closely guarded secrets?
So while we may never know for sure if Robert Ivan Nichols was connected to the Zodiac killer, his story raises some profound questions about the nature of identity, the weight of secrets, and the enduring power of the past.
It's a case that lingers in the mind, prompting us to reflect on the choices we make and the mysteries we all carry within us.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the strange and enigmatic case of Robert Ivan Nichols, a.k.a. Joseph Newton Chandler III. It's a story that proves that truth can be stranger than fiction, and that sometimes the answers we seek only lead to more questions.
And as always, remember, there's more to the story than meets the eye. Keep asking questions, keep digging, and never stop searching for the truth.
True crime, no bull.